This audiobook reveals why anger keeps you trapped and why most solutions only strengthen its grip. The truth is, anger is not your enemy, nor is it something to suppress. When you shift your relationship with it, you unlock a power greater than control, one that makes you truly undefeatable. Becoming undefeatable. Introduction. You know the cycle all too well, the familiar surge of heat rising in your chest, the tightening of your jaw, the rush of thoughts that fuel an inner fire until it explodes outward, leaving devastation in its wake. In the aftermath, you're left with the wreckage of damaged relationships, professional setbacks, and the crushing weight of regret. You've tried the conventional approaches, counting to 10, deep breathing, anger management techniques that promise control. Perhaps they've helped temporarily, but the underlying pressure remains, ready to erupt when you least expect it. These methods often fall short because they treat anger as an enemy to be suppressed, rather than a signal to be understood. What if freedom from anger's grip isn't about fighting harder, but about letting go? Not through passive resignation, but through a profound shift in how you relate to the very experiences that trigger your anger. This isn't about denying legitimate grievances or accepting injustice. It's about discovering a power far greater than anger could ever provide. Think of anger as a prison, one whose walls are built from rigid expectations, interpretations, and attachments. You didn't choose to build this prison, but its maintenance requires your ongoing participation. The remarkable truth is that the keys to freedom have been within your reach all along, waiting to be recognized through a shift in perception. The challenging people in your life, the unfair situations you face, the accumulated frustrations of daily existence, these won't magically disappear. But your relationship with them can transform so fundamentally that what once triggered overwhelming anger becomes an opportunity for deeper understanding and empowered action. This book won't teach you to eliminate anger. That's neither possible nor desirable. Anger itself isn't the enemy. It's your relationship with anger that determines whether it controls you or serves as valuable information about what matters most to you. Through the chapters ahead, you'll discover how to access a level of peace and personal power that remains stable, regardless of external circumstances. The path forward isn't about adding more techniques to your emotional management toolkit. It's about recognizing and releasing the unconscious patterns that keep anger's prison intact. As you progress through this book, you'll learn to see anger not as an inevitable response to life's challenges, but as a choice point, an opportunity to respond from wisdom rather than react from conditioning. True freedom from anger's control emerges not from suppression or avoidance, but from a fundamental shift in how you understand and process the experiences that typically ignite it. This transformation doesn't require years of practice or special techniques. It begins the moment you recognize that your relationship with anger can change, and that this change starts with perception rather than control. Are you ready to discover what lies beyond anger's walls? Chapter 1. The Illusion of Control. Picture someone standing at the ocean's edge, shouting commands at the incoming waves, demanding they stop or change their course. The futility is obvious. Yet how often do we mirror this behavior in our daily lives, raging against circumstances beyond our control? This fundamental mismatch between our expectations and reality forms the breeding ground for anger. You experience this gap constantly in modern life. Traffic refuses to move at your preferred pace. Technology malfunctions at crucial moments. People fail to behave according to your standards. Each instance triggers a surge of anger not because these situations are inherently anger-worthy, but because they violate your expectation of how things should be. This instinct for control runs deep in human psychology. Your brain perceives uncertainty as a threat, activating the same neural pathways that respond to physical danger. The illusion of control serves as a psychological shield, protecting you from feeling vulnerable in an unpredictable world. Modern life intensifies this dynamic, surrounded by smart devices and customizable experiences. You're conditioned to expect that everything should bend to your preferences. The intensity of your anger often correlates directly with the strength of your attachment to specific outcomes. When you grip tightly to how a situation must unfold, you create the perfect conditions for rage when reality inevitably deviates from your script. The parent who explodes when their child won't follow instructions, the professional who seethes at a colleague's different approach, the driver who rages at being cut off, all share the common thread of demanding that reality conform to their expectations. Your brain's threat response system, while essential for survival, can't distinguish between physical threats and challenges to your expectations. When your carefully constructed plans derail, when others don't respect your boundaries, or when situations feel out of your control, your nervous system reacts as if facing mortal danger. This explains why anger can feel so overwhelming and automatic. It's your mind's primitive response to perceived chaos. The paradox becomes clear. The more desperately you try to control your environment, other people, or future outcomes, the more frustration and anger you experience. The solution lies not in achieving greater control, but in fundamentally transforming your relationship with control itself. This doesn't mean accepting injustice or becoming passive in the face of genuine wrongs. Instead, it means developing the wisdom to distinguish between what you can and cannot influence. True power emerges not from forcing reality to conform to your wishes, but from learning to navigate life's currents with flexibility and presence. Your anger serves as a precise indicator of where you're attempting to control the uncontrollable. Each burst of rage points to an expectation, a demand, or an attachment that may need examination. The driver tailgating you can't be controlled, but your response can. Your colleague's work style isn't yours to dictate, but your approach to collaboration is. The weather won't bow to your schedule, but your preparation and attitude remain within your power. The path to freedom from anger begins with this crucial recognition. Most of what fuels your anger stems not from external events, but from your internal insistence that things be different than they are. This insight doesn't eliminate anger, nor should it, but it transforms your relationship with it. When you understand that anger largely arises from frustrated attempts to control the uncontrollable, you gain the power to choose a different response. This revelation opens the door to profound change, but it also raises important questions. If releasing control creates freedom, why do we resist it so strongly? What drives our deep-seated need to control our environment and others? The answers reveal the hidden costs of maintaining the illusion of control, costs that extend far beyond moments of anger to shape the very quality of your life. Chapter 2. The Hidden Cost. When you hold on to anger, you're not just holding an emotion. You're gripping a burning coal that scorches your own hands while failing to affect its intended target. This visceral truth becomes evident when we examine the devastating toll anger takes across every dimension of your life, consuming far more than most realize until the damage becomes irreversible. The physiological impact of chronic anger is profound and well documented. Each surge of rage triggers a cascade of stress hormones that wear down your body's systems over time. Your heart rate accelerates, blood pressure spikes, and inflammation spreads throughout your tissues. Medical research has consistently shown that individuals prone to frequent anger experience significantly higher rates of cardiovascular disease, weakened immune function, and accelerated cellular aging. These effects accumulate silently, like interest on a debt you don't know you're accruing until the bill comes due. Beyond the physical toll, anger systematically dismantled your mental clarity. When rage takes hold, your brain's higher cognitive functions, reasoning, perspective-taking, creative problem-solving, become hijacked by more primitive responses. Your perception narrows, filtering out information that doesn't support your angry narrative. Solutions that might be obvious in a calmer state become invisible. The world reduces to a binary of threat and defense, eliminating the nuanced thinking needed for genuine understanding and growth. The relationship damage caused by chronic anger often proves the most costly. Trust, once fractured by repeated outbursts, becomes increasingly difficult to rebuild. People begin walking on eggshells around you, withholding their authentic selves. Even when your anger feels justified, the defensive patterns it creates in others can poison connections that took years to build. Professional opportunities quietly disappear as colleagues and clients choose to avoid the unpredictability of your responses. Perhaps most insidiously, anger blocks your connection to deeper meaning and purpose. It acts as a thick fog between you and life's moments of beauty, insight, and genuine human connection. The energy that could be directed toward growth and creation instead feeds a cycle of reaction and regret. Your spiritual well-being, that sense of being aligned with your highest values and potential, erodes with each choice to nurture grievance over grace. You might argue that anger serves important functions. It can motivate action, set boundaries, or signal when something needs to change. While these observations hold truth, they overlook a crucial distinction: the temporary utility of anger versus its accumulated cost. Much like using a credit card for every purchase, the small conveniences mask a mounting debt that eventually demands payment with heavy interest. This anger debt manifests in countless ways: the promotion lost due to a single outburst, the relationship that finally breaks under the weight of unresolved resentment, the chronic health conditions that emerge from years of internal stress. Even more subtle are the opportunities never seen, the connections never made, the moments of joy never experienced, because anger's distorting lens filtered them out before they could reach your awareness. The belief that anger is necessary for justice or positive change represents one of the most persistent myths in modern culture. History's most effective agents of change, from Martin Luther King Jr. to Nelson Mandela, demonstrated that the most powerful transformations come not from rage, but from focused, principled action combined with profound compassion. Anger might spark initial movement, but it rarely sustains meaningful progress. Consider how anger systematically blinds you to alternatives. Like wearing dark glasses indoors, it may offer a sense of protection, but ultimately impairs your ability to navigate effectively. Every moment spent nurturing grievances is a moment lost to growth, connection, or the pursuit of what truly matters to you. The energy required to maintain anger depletes the very resources needed for creating positive change. The true cost of chronic anger extends far beyond its immediate expression. It acts as a corrosive force in your life, steadily degrading your health, relationships, opportunities, and inner peace. Each burst of rage writes another check against your well-being that will eventually require payment. Yet for many, anger has become so familiar that it feels like an essential part of identity, a reality we'll explore in the next chapter. Chapter 3. The Anger Identity. Imagine wearing a heavy coat for so long that you've forgotten it's separate from your own skin. The weight, the restriction, the warmth. They've all become so familiar that you can no longer distinguish where the coat ends and you begin. This is how anger becomes fused with identity, transforming from an emotional response into what feels like an unchangeable part of who you are. The roots of this fusion often stretch back to early experiences where anger served as a survival mechanism. In environments where anger was the primary emotional currency, where it represented strength or commanded respect, you learned to wear it like armor. Cultural messages reinforce this, particularly for men who were taught that anger is more acceptable than vulnerability, or for women who discovered that anger could provide a voice in situations where they felt powerless. Your relationship with anger likely deepened through family patterns. Perhaps you grew up in a household where anger was the default response to life's challenges. You witnessed adults meeting uncertainty with rage, frustration with outbursts, fear with aggression. These became your templates for navigating the world, not because they were effective, but because they were familiar. Over time, anger became more than an emotion. It became a lens through which you view the world, a primary tool in your emotional toolkit. A reflexive response so automatic you stopped questioning its necessity. This transformation happened gradually, like water wearing a groove in stone, until anger became your default setting, your go-to response, your emotional home base. This anger as identity serves multiple functions. It acts as a shield, protecting you from more vulnerable emotions like hurt, fear, or sadness. It provides a sense of power when you feel powerless, a voice when you feel unheard, a way to maintain distance when intimacy feels threatening. In many ways, anger has been your faithful companion, showing up reliably when other emotions felt too risky to express. The concept of anger scripts explains how these patterns become automated. These are the predictable sequences of emotional response that play out in your life like well-rehearsed scenes in a play. Someone questions your judgment. Cue anger. Plans change unexpectedly. Cue anger. You feel disrespected. Cue anger. These scripts run so smoothly you barely notice them starting, let alone question their necessity. The prospect of releasing anger as identity naturally triggers resistance. If anger has been your strength, your protection, your way of being seen and heard in the world, what remains when you set it down? The fear of becoming passive, of losing your edge, of being vulnerable to hurt. These concerns are valid but ultimately misguided. True strength lies not in your capacity for anger, but in your ability to choose your responses consciously. Think of anger as a role you've played for so long you've forgotten you're acting. Like a method actor who stays in character off stage, you've maintained this persona so consistently that it feels inseparable from your authentic self. But beneath the role lies your true nature, more spacious, more nuanced, more capable of responding to life's challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity. Understanding this distinction between your essential nature and your learned responses is crucial. You are not your anger any more than an actor is the character they portray. This recognition creates the space needed for change, allowing you to examine your relationship with anger without the fear that questioning it will somehow diminish who you are. When you begin to explore your anger archaeology, tracing the origins of your relationship with anger, patterns emerge. You start to see how specific experiences shaped your emotional responses, how certain beliefs about anger's necessity were formed, and most importantly, how many of these patterns may no longer serve your current reality. Consider the difference between an identity-based anger response and one that comes from your deeper self. When criticism triggers an angry defense, that's the old role at work, protecting a threatened ego. But when you can receive the same criticism with curiosity, examining what's useful while maintaining your sense of worth, that's responding from your authentic nature. The freedom you seek doesn't come from suppressing anger or pretending it doesn't exist. It comes from recognizing that anger is a tool you learn to use, not an immutable part of who you are. This understanding creates the possibility of choice, the ability to step back from habitual reactions and access responses that better serve your present circumstances and deepest values. To move beyond anger as identity requires developing the capacity to observe your anger rather than be consumed by it. This vital shift from identification to observation opens the door to the transformative practices that follow. Chapter 4: The Witness Within. Picture yourself standing atop a mountain peak, watching storm clouds roil and thunder in the valley below. Though powerful and dramatic, the storm cannot touch you from your vantage point. This fundamental shift in perspective, from being caught in the storm to observing it from above, illustrates the transformative power of creating space between yourself and your anger. Within your consciousness exists a remarkable capacity, the observing self. This aspect of your awareness can witness thoughts and emotions without becoming entangled in them. Research in neuroscience has revealed that this isn't merely a philosophical concept, but a tangible neural reality. When you engage this observing capacity, your prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, strengthens its ability to modulate the emotional reactivity generated by the amygdala, your brain's threat detection system. The challenge is that anger often feels like a force that simply happens to you, a sudden surge of emotion that seems to bypass all conscious control. One moment you're calm, the next you're in the grip of rage, with no apparent space between trigger and reaction. This experience is universal, but it masks a crucial truth. Anger unfolds as a process, not an event. Between the initial trigger and full expression lies a spectrum of development, offering multiple points where awareness can interrupt the escalation. Think of anger as a powerful river current. When you're swept up in it, the force feels overwhelming and resistance seems futile. But just as a river has banks that contain and direct its flow, your awareness can provide stable ground from which to witness the current without being carried away by it. This isn't about suppressing the river's flow. It's about finding a position of conscious choice rather than helpless reactivity. The concern that creating space through observation might lead to emotional suppression or detachment is natural, but misguided. The witness perspective doesn't diminish emotional authenticity. It enhances your capacity to engage with emotions intelligently rather than reactively. Research shows that people who develop this observing capacity actually experience emotions more fully while maintaining greater choice in how they respond to them. Understanding the neuroscience behind this process can help overcome skepticism. When you're triggered, your amygdala initiates a threat response in milliseconds, flooding your system with stress hormones before your conscious mind can intervene. However, the prefrontal cortex can learn to recognize this activation increasingly earlier in the cycle. Through consistent practice, you can develop neural pathways that allow awareness to enter the picture sooner, creating crucial space between trigger and response. This space, what psychologists call the stimulus-response gap, is where your freedom from anger begins. Every time you manage to pause, even for a moment, between a trigger and your habitual reaction, you strengthen these neural pathways of conscious choice. The cumulative effect of these small pauses gradually transforms your relationship with anger from one of captivity to one of capacity. The pause practice works with this natural capacity for awareness, training your brain to recognize the earliest signs of anger activation. The practice involves three key elements: recognizing triggers, engaging the observing self, and consciously choosing a response rather than reacting automatically. When practiced consistently, this simple but profound technique creates an increasing sense of space and choice in formerly automatic anger reactions. Consider how this plays out in real situations. Without the witness perspective, a critical comment instantly triggers a defensive, angry response. Your body tenses, your voice raises, and you're launching a counterattack before you even realize what's happening. With the witness perspective engaged, you can observe the same trigger while maintaining choice, noticing the physical sensations of anger arising, recognizing the thoughts and impulses moving through your mind, but remaining grounded in awareness rather than swept away by reactivity. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Like any skill, developing the witness perspective requires practice and patience. The key is understanding that each moment of awareness, no matter how brief, strengthens your capacity for conscious choice. Every time you manage to pause between trigger and response, you're literally rewiring your brain's reactive patterns. As you strengthen this capacity for witnessing, you'll begin to notice something crucial. Much of what fuels your anger are the stories you tell yourself about what's happening. Interpretations, assumptions, and narratives that turn neutral events into personal affronts. These stories, more than the events themselves, often determine the intensity and duration of your anger response. Chapter 5. The Stories We Tell. Two travelers stand beneath the same sky as rain begins to fall. One clenches his fists, cursing the weather for ruining his carefully laid plans. The other tilts her face upward, grateful for the nourishment the parched earth so desperately needs. Same rain, radically different experiences, not because of the water falling from the sky, but because of the meaning each traveler assigns to it. This fundamental truth lies at the heart of your relationship with anger. It's not the events themselves that generate your emotional response, but the story you tell about what those events mean. Understanding this distinction holds the key to transforming your experience of anger from the inside out. Your brain is constantly creating meaning from the raw data of experience, weaving interpretations so quickly and automatically that they feel like objective reality rather than subjective narrative. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your instant narrative might be, "They deliberately disrespected me," rather than, "They probably didn't see me," or "They might be rushing to an emergency." The first interpretation virtually guarantees anger. The alternatives open the door to understanding or compassion. These interpretive patterns run deep, shaped by past experiences, cultural messages, and unconscious assumptions about how the world should work. They form what psychologists call cognitive distortions, systematic ways your mind skews reality toward threat and grievance. Mind reading occurs when you assume you know others' negative intentions without evidence. Catastrophizing transforms minor setbacks into major calamities. Personalization interprets others' actions as deliberately targeted at you, when they likely have nothing to do with you at all. The power of these distortions lies in their invisibility. They feel like clear perception rather than interpretation. When your colleague doesn't acknowledge your greeting, you don't experience it as, "I'm creating a story that they're deliberately snubbing me." Instead, their rudeness feels like an objective fact, making anger feel completely justified and natural. This is where the transformative concept of story awareness becomes essential. Story awareness means developing the capacity to recognize your interpretations as created rather than discovered. It means catching yourself in the act of meaning-making and remembering that you always have a choice about which meaning you assign. Some resist this idea, viewing it as naive, positive thinking that denies real problems. But rewriting your anger narratives isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about seeing situations more accurately and completely. It's about recognizing that while the facts of what happened may be fixed, your interpretation of those facts remains a choice. Think of your interpretations as colored lenses you unconsciously wear. If you wear red-tinted glasses long enough, you forget you're wearing them. The whole world just looks red. Similarly, if you wear the lens of "people should never disappoint me" or "life should always be fair," you'll consistently generate anger when reality inevitably conflicts with these expectations. The path to transformation begins with recognizing these lenses and understanding that you can choose different ones. When you catch yourself in an anger-generating narrative, pause and ask, "What lens am I wearing right now? What other lenses could I try on? What different story could I tell about this situation?" This isn't about finding the right interpretation, but about expanding your range of possible meanings. Each new perspective you can access represents another degree of freedom from automatic anger responses. The key practice is what I call story revision, actively identifying and rewriting your automatic narratives about triggering situations. When anger arises, trace it back to the interpretation generating it. Then consciously explore alternative narratives that might be equally or more true. The process reveals how the same situation can transform through different interpretive lenses. A missed deadline becomes either a personal attack or an opportunity to improve communication. A partner's forgetfulness becomes either proof they don't care or a reminder that everyone has human limitations. This capacity to choose your narratives consciously rather than react to them unconsciously lies at the heart of anger transformation. Every time you catch an anger-generating story and consciously choose a different interpretation, you strengthen your freedom from automatic anger responses. The real power of narrative rewriting emerges as you recognize that while you can't always control what happens to you, you maintain constant choice over the meaning you assign to what happens. This recognition transforms anger from an inevitable reaction to external events into an optional response based on your chosen interpretation. Your stories about anger don't just exist in your mind. They manifest in your physical body, creating patterns of tension and reaction that offer another powerful avenue for transformation. Chapter 6. The Body's Wisdom. Like steam trapped in a pressure cooker, anger builds in your body seeking release. Without proper channels for this potent energy, pressure accumulates until something gives way, usually in ways you later regret. But within this same physical system lies an innate intelligence that, when properly understood, transforms from a source of explosive reactivity into a wellspring of vital energy and clear action. Your anger has a physical signature long before it becomes a mental story. Your heartbeat quickens, muscles tense, breath shortens, temperature rises. These bodily signals precede the thoughts that label and amplify your emotional response. Yet modern life trains you to override these subtle physical messages, creating a dangerous disconnect between mind and body that allows anger to build unchecked beneath your awareness. This mind-body split creates a self-perpetuating cycle. Chronic anger establishes habitual tension patterns. A permanently clenched jaw, raised shoulders, constricted breathing. These physical patterns then send constant signals of threat to your nervous system, priming you for more anger. Your body becomes like an instrument tuned to play one note, rage, even when the situation calls for a different response. The intensity of anger's physical sensations can feel overwhelming, especially when you've learned to fear or fight against them. The racing heart, surging adrenaline, and muscular tension can seem like enemies to be suppressed, rather than intelligent signals asking for your attention. This resistance only amplifies the pressure, creating what you fear most: loss of control. But your body possesses an innate somatic intelligence, a natural capacity to process and release emotional energy when given conscious attention. Like water, emotional energy follows the path of least resistance. When blocked, it floods destructively. When properly channeled, it nourishes and energizes constructive action. This channeling begins with developing physical awareness. Your body speaks in sensations before your mind creates stories. Learning to listen to these subtle signals provides early warning systems and release valves for mounting pressure. Rather than suppressing or being overwhelmed by anger's physical intensity, you can learn to ride its waves with presence and skill. Some resist body-based approaches, fearing that focusing on physical sensations means ignoring legitimate problems or suppressing justified emotions. But true somatic awareness does neither. It provides a foundation for responding to challenges from a place of centered power rather than reactive force. Working with the body's intelligence doesn't negate the need for boundaries or action. It ensures those responses come from clarity rather than chaos. The key practice for developing this awareness is systematic body scanning, bringing conscious attention to physical sensations without trying to change them. This isn't about relaxation, though that may occur naturally. It's about building your capacity to be present with intense sensation without being hijacked by it. Start at your feet and slowly move your attention upward through your body, noting areas of tension, temperature, movement, or any other sensation. Pay particular attention to your jaw, shoulders, chest, and belly, common areas where anger resides. Don't try to fix or change anything. Simply observe with curiosity and allowance. Notice how sensations shift and change under your attention. A tight throat might soften, a clenched fist might relax, or tension might move to a different area entirely. This movement is your body's natural intelligence at work, processing and releasing emotional energy when given the space to do so. With practice, this scanning becomes automatic, offering real-time awareness of rising anger before it overtakes you. You might notice your shoulders creeping up during a tense conversation, signaling the need to take a breath before responding. Or feel your jaw clenching while reading an inflammatory email, reminding you to pause before firing off an angry reply. The ultimate aim isn't to eliminate anger's physical components, but to develop a new relationship with them. When you can feel sensation without being consumed by it, anger transforms from an overwhelming force into valuable information about your boundaries, needs, and values. This somatic awareness forms an essential bridge between understanding anger mentally and experiencing genuine freedom from its grip. True liberation requires both insight and embodiment, knowing in both mind and body that you can experience intense sensation without losing your center. Mastery of anger isn't about achieving a state of perpetual calm, but about developing the capacity to stay present with whatever arises in your physical experience. In this presence lies real power, not the pseudo-power of explosive reaction, but the genuine power of conscious response. The journey from pressure cooker to skillful channel begins with this simple but profound practice of attending to your body's wisdom. As you develop this awareness, you'll find that the same energy that once felt destructive can become a source of vitality and clear action when properly understood and channeled. Chapter 7. The Power of Presence. Picture someone standing in a magnificent landscape, expensive binoculars pressed firmly against their eyes, scanning distant mountain peaks while continuously stumbling over rocks scattered at their feet. This constant focus on what lies ahead or behind, never on the present moment, mirrors how most navigate their emotional landscape, particularly regarding anger. In today's hyper-connected world, your mind constantly pulls you from the present, replaying past grievances or anticipating future conflicts. This mental time travel creates the perfect breeding ground for anger. When you're lost in thoughts about past injustices, your body responds as if they're happening now. When you're anxiously projecting potential future confrontations, your nervous system already begins preparing for battle. But here's the profound truth. Anger cannot fully exist in complete presence. This isn't abstract theory. It's supported by neuroscience. When you're fully present, the brain regions responsible for rumination and anxiety show decreased activity. The mental loops that typically generate and sustain anger require you to step out of the now, either backwards into memory or forwards into imagination. In presence, these loops naturally begin to dissolve. Yet in a culture that celebrates constant productivity and perpetual planning, presence often feels like a luxury you can't afford. Smartphones ping with notifications, deadlines loom, and responsibilities pile up. The very suggestion of staying present might trigger resistance. I don't have time for mindfulness. I have real problems to solve. This is where understanding anger momentum becomes crucial. Like a boulder rolling downhill, anger gains force through stories about past and future. Each thought about how you were wronged or what might go wrong adds velocity to this emotional mass. But presence acts as level ground, a place where this momentum naturally dissipates. Some worry that mindfulness means becoming passive or avoiding problems. But true presence actually enables more effective action by clearing away the mental static that clouds judgment. When you're fully present, you respond to what's actually happening rather than reacting to stories about what happened or might happen. Think of anger like ice, solid, rigid, potentially destructive. But just as ice naturally melts when exposed to warmth, anger begins to transform when held in the light of present awareness. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying anger, quite the opposite. It means experiencing it fully, but without the additional layers of story that usually accompany it. The 5 senses anchor practice offers a direct path back to presence when anger begins to arise. Instead of getting caught in mental narratives, systematically notice. What do you see right now in your immediate environment? What sounds are present, from the obvious to the subtle? What physical sensations can you feel in your body? What scents are in the air? What tastes are present in your mouth? This simple but profound practice interrupts anger's momentum by anchoring attention in immediate sensory experience. When caught in an angry story about a coworker's disrespect, presence reveals that in this moment, you're actually just sitting in a chair, breathing, with the sun warming your skin. This doesn't invalidate your concern, but it provides perspective and space around it. Consider how differently situations unfold when approached from past-future focus versus present awareness. Without presence, a minor criticism triggers hours of mental arguments about past injustices and future confrontations. With presence, that same criticism might still sting, but the experience stays contained to the actual moment rather than expanding into an epic mental narrative. Freedom from anger begins with developing this capacity to be fully present with experience as it unfolds. This doesn't mean anger never arises, but rather that you develop the ability to meet it with awareness instead of being swept away by its momentum. And in this space of presence, something remarkable becomes possible. The discovery that anger, when fully experienced without resistance, contains wisdom essential for genuine transformation. Chapter 8: The Wisdom in Anger. Imagine anger as a persistent messenger at your door, knocking with increasing intensity until you finally pause, take a breath, and open to whatever it needs to communicate. Like many, you've likely spent years treating this messenger as an unwelcome intruder, using every technique imaginable to silence the knocking. But what if anger's persistence isn't a sign of its destructive nature, but rather an indication of how important its message is for your growth and well-being? This revolutionary shift in perspective, from viewing anger as an enemy to recognizing it as a messenger, transforms your entire relationship with this powerful emotion. When you fight against anger, resist it, or try to suppress it, you paradoxically increase its power over you while missing the vital information it carries about your needs, boundaries, values, and unhealed wounds. Modern psychology and neuroscience support this understanding. Your brain's emotion centers don't generate feelings randomly. They're sophisticated information processing systems that alert you to threats, violations, and imbalances in your life. Anger specifically carries precise data about situations that conflict with your values, boundaries that need reinforcement, or needs that require attention. Consider how your body uses pain to communicate important messages about physical health. You wouldn't try to eliminate your capacity for physical pain. That would be dangerous. Similarly, trying to eliminate anger leaves you without crucial emotional intelligence about your psychological and social well-being. This perspective takes tremendous courage to adopt, especially if you've spent years viewing anger as something to overcome or control. It requires trusting that beneath anger's intense surface lies wisdom rather than destruction. But this trust opens the door to profound transformation. Developing anger intelligence means learning to extract wisdom from angry feelings without being controlled by them. It's about maintaining enough presence to ask, what is this anger telling me about my needs? What boundaries might need strengthening? What values feel threatened? What old wounds are being activated? Some resist this approach, fearing it justifies or indulges destructive behavior. But understanding anger's message doesn't mean acting on its immediate impulses. Think of anger like your car's check engine light. It signals something needs attention. But racing the engine won't solve the underlying issue. The light isn't the problem. It's the messenger about the problem. When you treat anger as information rather than an enemy, you develop the capacity to respond rather than react. This creates space to address root causes instead of just managing symptoms. You might discover that chronic anger at work signals misalignment with your values, or that frequent anger in relationships points to boundaries that need clearer expression. The anger dialogue practice provides a structured way to uncover these messages. Find a quiet moment and write down exactly what you're angry about. Then, as if interviewing the anger itself, ask questions like, what do you want me to know? What needs aren't being met? What's really at stake here? Write both the questions and responses, allowing your anger to communicate freely without judgment. This practice often reveals surprising insights. Anger at a partner's behavior might actually signal fear of abandonment. Rage about a work situation might mask grief about sacrificing important dreams. By creating space for anger to deliver its message, you often find that the surface trigger isn't the real issue. Through this process, anger transforms from an overwhelming force into a valuable source of self-knowledge. Rather than experiencing anger as an enemy to battle, you begin recognizing it as an ally and understanding yourself more deeply. This doesn't mean anger disappears, but its grip loosens as its message gets heard. Ultimately, freedom from anger's control comes not through elimination, but through understanding and integration. When you stop fighting against anger and start listening to it, you access its transformative wisdom, while paradoxically reducing its destructive impact. The key lies not in silencing the messenger, but in receiving the message with presence and curiosity. As you develop this relationship with anger, you'll discover that one of its most frequent messages concerns boundaries, the limits and standards you need to establish for your well-being. This critical insight leads us to our next exploration: how anger serves as a guardian of healthy boundaries, and how to translate its urgent signals into clear, empowered action. Chapter 9. The Boundary Paradox. The relationship between boundaries and anger reveals one of life's most delicate paradoxes. Consider a garden. Without any protection, it gets trampled and destroyed by outside forces. But surround it with impenetrable walls, and it withers from isolation, deprived of the natural exchange it needs to thrive. Your emotional and psychological well-being operates in much the same way. Many approach boundaries from one of two extremes. They either avoid setting limits altogether, leading to resentment and explosive anger when their unspoken lines are crossed, or they construct rigid walls that generate constant conflict through inflexible enforcement. Neither approach creates the conditions for genuine peace and healthy relationships. The neuroscience of boundaries reveals why this pattern persists. Your brain's threat detection system activates both when boundaries are violated and when you fear disconnection from others. This creates an internal conflict, protect yourself or maintain connection, that often manifests as anger. But this is a false choice based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what healthy boundaries actually do. True boundaries aren't walls or weapons. They're clear definitions of where you begin and end. They're not about controlling others or demanding specific behaviors. Rather, they communicate your limits, values, and needs with clarity, while respecting others' autonomy to make their own choices. This distinction between boundaries, which we control, and rules, which attempt to control others, is crucial for reducing anger. Many struggle with boundary setting due to early experiences that taught them to prioritize others' comfort over their own needs. Some learned that having limits was selfish, or that expressing them led to rejection. Others experienced serious boundary violations that left them oscillating between no boundaries and rigid defensiveness. These patterns create a chronic anger trigger, either from continuous boundary crossing or from the exhaustion of maintaining defensive walls. Boundary clarity offers a different path. Unlike reactive or rigid boundaries, clear boundaries emerge from self-knowledge and self-respect. They don't require anger to enforce because they're simply statements of truth about your limits, preferences, and needs. Think of healthy boundaries like a cell membrane, selectively permeable, allowing nourishing connections while preventing harmful intrusions. This biological metaphor reveals something profound about boundaries. They're not obstacles to connection, but prerequisites for it. Just as a cell can't function without its membrane, you can't form genuine relationships without clear boundaries. The membrane doesn't cut the cell off from its environment. It facilitates healthy exchange while maintaining the cell's integrity. When you understand boundaries this way, setting them becomes an act of self-care rather than aggression. Clear boundaries actually reduce anger because they prevent the accumulation of resentment from unclear or violated limits. They allow you to maintain connection while protecting your well-being. The process begins with getting clear about your actual limits, not the ones you think you should have or what others expect, but your genuine physical, emotional, and energetic boundaries. Notice where you consistently feel angry or resentful. These emotions often signal boundary issues that need attention. Communicating boundaries effectively requires staying centered rather than reactive. Instead of waiting until anger forces an explosive expression of limits, practice stating them clearly and early. Use simple, direct language that focuses on what you will or won't do, rather than attempting to control others' behavior. Healthy boundaries aren't ultimatums or threats. They're clarity about where you stand, what you need, and how you'll care for yourself. When expressed this way, boundaries actually reduce conflict, because they eliminate the ambiguity that often leads to boundary violations and subsequent anger. Modern research supports this approach, showing that clear boundaries reduce stress hormones and improve relationship satisfaction. By contrast, unclear boundaries keep your nervous system in a state of hypervigilance, primed for anger as a defensive response. Most importantly, recognize that boundary setting is a practice, not a one-time event. Like the gardener who continuously tends their fences, maintaining healthy boundaries requires ongoing attention and adjustment. But unlike rigid walls built from anger, clear boundaries create the conditions for both protection and connection, the foundation for genuine freedom from anger's grip. While establishing clear boundaries offers essential protection, true freedom from anger requires something more: the capacity to extend understanding to others, even those who trigger our strongest reactions. This is where we turn our attention to the transformative power of compassion. By cultivating genuine empathy alongside firm boundaries, you create space for both self-protection and human connection. The walls of anger that once seemed necessary begin to soften, replaced by a balanced awareness that honors both your needs and the complex humanity of others. You'll find that understanding someone's behavior doesn't mean excusing it. Rather, it frees you from the exhausting cycle of reactivity that keeps anger alive. Through this dual approach of boundaries and compassion, you access a deeper form of emotional security, one that doesn't depend on keeping others at arm's length. Chapter 10. The Compassion Bridge. Imagine trying to extinguish a raging fire by throwing more flames onto it. The inferno only grows stronger, more destructive, consuming everything in its path. Yet this is precisely how most of us respond to anger. We meet it with more anger, perpetuating an endless cycle of emotional combustion. Now envision instead responding with water, cool, flowing, able to absorb heat without being changed by it. This is the transformative power of understanding and compassion. Your instinct to react with anger when others behave poorly is completely natural. The brain's threat detection system activates automatically, triggering a cascade of stress hormones that prepare you for conflict. Yet research consistently shows that this defensive response, while temporarily satisfying, only deepens the cycle of hostility and reduces your ability to see situations clearly. Studies in social psychology reveal a fascinating pattern. When people understand the contextual factors driving others' behavior, their angry responses naturally diminish. even without any conscious attempt to suppress their emotions. This occurs because anger requires an attribution of intentional harm or disregard. When you recognize that others' actions stem from their own pain, fear, and conditioning rather than malice, the fuel for anger dissolves. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or remaining in toxic situations. Rather, it's about developing what psychologists call compassionate perspective taking. The ability to recognize that behind every angry action lies a suffering human being whose behavior, however problematic, makes sense within their own internal framework of reality. Consider how different your reaction might be if you could temporarily put on special glasses that allowed you to see the pain, fear, and past experiences driving someone's current behavior. You'd still see their actions clearly, but you'd also perceive the complex web of causes and conditions that led to this moment. This broader vision doesn't require you to accept mistreatment, but it does free you from the exhausting cycle of reactive anger. The neural pathways for empathy and anger cannot be equally active at the same time. When you consciously engage your capacity for understanding, you literally inhibit the brain circuits responsible for aggressive responses. This isn't about suppressing anger. It's about activating an incompatible neural state that naturally transforms your experience. Most people's harmful behaviors stem from unmet needs, unhealed wounds, or distorted perceptions they learned long ago. They're operating from their own limited map of reality, often unconsciously recreating patterns they themselves experienced. This doesn't make their actions right, but understanding this truth helps release the grip of personal offense that intensifies anger. Your anger often flares hottest when someone's behavior seems incomprehensible, when you can't fathom why any reasonable person would act that way. But this very bewilderment signals an opportunity. If their actions make no sense to you, you're missing crucial pieces of their reality. The solution isn't to justify their behavior, but to get curious about what you don't yet understand. The capacity for understanding can coexist with maintaining strong boundaries. In fact, genuine compassion often helps you set clear limits because you're acting from wisdom rather than reactive emotion. You can recognize someone's suffering while still protecting yourself from its harmful manifestations. Studies of long-term meditators show enhanced activity in brain regions associated with empathy and emotional regulation, along with reduced reactivity in areas that process threat and anger. This suggests that cultivating understanding isn't just a philosophical approach. It creates tangible changes in how your brain processes potentially triggering situations. This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience and practice to override the brain's default defensive reactions. But each time you pause to consider the fuller context of someone's behavior, you strengthen neural pathways that support understanding over anger. You begin to see that behind every angry action lies a human being whose suffering has temporarily overwhelmed their capacity for skillful response. The pain we experience from others' actions is real, but holding on to anger about past hurts only perpetuates our own suffering. That burning resentment you carry becomes a poison that affects you far more than it touches those who wounded you. Each time you replay those moments of betrayal or rejection, you're allowing that pain to echo through your present reality, coloring every interaction with its dark hues. As we'll explore in the next chapter, while understanding helps us relate differently to others in the present, forgiveness allows us to release the heavy burden of past injuries, not for their sake, but for our own liberation. This isn't about excusing harmful behavior or pretending it didn't matter. It's about freeing yourself from the exhausting weight of accumulated grievances that drain your energy and dim your spirit. Your freedom lies in recognizing that you can honor the reality of your pain while choosing not to let it define your future. Chapter 11. The Forgiveness Path. The weight of unforgiveness is like carrying a boulder uphill. Every step requires tremendous effort, drains your energy, and prevents you from moving freely through life. Yet this burden isn't placed upon you by others. You maintain its crushing presence through your own grip. The most surprising truth about this weight is that you can set it down at any moment. Not because the injury wasn't real, but because continuing to carry it hurts no one but yourself. Understanding true forgiveness requires first dispelling several critical misconceptions. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting what happened or pretending you weren't hurt. It doesn't require reconciliation with those who harmed you, or resuming relationships that are unhealthy. Most importantly, forgiveness is not about condoning harmful actions or surrendering your right to justice. Neuroscience reveals how unforgiveness maintains a state of hypervigilance in your nervous system, keeping you perpetually prepared for past hurts to repeat. Your body remains in a subtle fight-or-flight state, diverting energy from healing and growth toward maintaining old wounds. This physiological burden compounds the emotional weight you carry. The distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation is crucial. Forgiveness is an internal process of emotional release that you undertake for your own well-being. Reconciliation is an external process requiring both parties' participation and genuine change. You can fully forgive someone while still maintaining strong boundaries or choosing not to have them in your life. When you understand that forgiveness is about freeing yourself rather than benefiting the offender, resistance often begins to soften. Just as a prisoner dreams of freedom, your heart longs to release the constriction of held resentment. But this release must be authentic. Trying to force forgiveness before you're ready can create additional layers of internal conflict. The path to genuine forgiveness often moves through several stages, acknowledging the full impact of what happened, allowing yourself to feel the legitimate emotions around the injury, understanding the broader context without excusing harmful behavior, and consciously choosing to release your attachment to the past for your own liberation. This process takes tremendous courage. It requires facing pain you may have been avoiding and examining beliefs about justice, fairness, and closure that may not serve you. It means developing enough self-trust to know you can protect yourself without maintaining anger as a shield. The paradox of forgiveness is that it often feels impossible until it happens. Much like trying to relax a clenched fist that has been held tight for years. The muscles have grown so accustomed to the tension that relaxation itself feels threatening. Yet just as that hand can slowly release, your heart can gradually soften its protective grip. True forgiveness emerges from strength, not weakness. It comes from recognizing that while you couldn't control what happened to you, you can choose whether to continue carrying its weight. It arises from understanding that resentment doesn't protect you from future harm. It only ensures that past injuries continue to limit your present life. Through the Freedom Letters practice, you create a private space to express everything you've held inside, all the pain, anger, and impact of what happened. These unsent letters aren't about communicating with others, but about allowing your own truth to be fully acknowledged. This validation of your experience, paradoxically, begins to loosen its grip on your present. Consider the difference in these responses to betrayal. In the first, you maintain constant vigilance, rehearsing the injury and strengthening your resentment as a form of protection. Your thoughts regularly return to the event, and your body remains tense, ready to defend against similar hurts. In the second, you've acknowledged the full truth of what happened while consciously choosing to stop investing your precious life energy in maintaining the wound. You've developed genuine self-protection through wisdom rather than walls. This release becomes possible not by diminishing the impact of what happened, but by recognizing that your present well-being matters more than maintaining your connection to past pain. Just as you wouldn't continue holding a hot coal simply because someone else threw it at you, you can choose to stop allowing past injuries to burn you in the present. Our relationship with the past hurts profoundly, impacts our experience of anger in the present. Every unresolved wound becomes a lens through which we view current situations, often triggering disproportionate reactions to minor frustrations. By gradually releasing our grip on old injuries, we create space for responding to life as it is, rather than through the filter of past pain. The essential shift in forgiveness is from seeing it as something you do for others to recognizing it as an act of profound self-love. It's about reclaiming the energy that maintaining resentment requires and redirecting it toward your own growth and joy. Freedom becomes possible not by changing the past, but by changing your relationship with it. Chapter 12. The Expectation Reset. Imagine repeatedly planting tropical flowers in Arctic conditions, returning each morning with increasing frustration to find them withered and dying. You might blame the flowers, the soil, or even yourself. But the fundamental issue lies in the misalignment between what you're demanding and what reality can provide. This struggle mirrors how we often approach life itself, harboring expectations that clash with the fundamental nature of people, situations, and human limitations. Your anger frequently stems not from events themselves, but from your insistence that they should be different. Research in cognitive psychology demonstrates that the gap between expectations and reality generates more emotional suffering than adverse circumstances themselves. When you demand that your partner should always understand you without explanation, that your children should never test boundaries, or that your career should progress without setbacks, you're essentially planting tropical flowers in Arctic soil. The distinction between healthy standards and rigid demands proves crucial. Standards acknowledge reality while pointing toward growth, like recognizing that relationships require ongoing communication while accepting that misunderstandings will occur. Demands, however, reject reality in favor of idealized shoulds, insisting that true love means perfect understanding without effort. One path leads to constructive action, the other generates perpetual anger. Your expectations often operate like invisible software running in the background of your mind, shaping your emotional responses without conscious awareness. These unconscious demands might include beliefs that life should be fair, people should always keep their word, hard work should guarantee success, or love should never involve conflict. Each unexamined expectation becomes a potential trigger for anger when reality inevitably fails to comply. The concept of expectation flexibility offers a transformative alternative to rigid demands. This isn't about lowering standards or accepting mediocrity. It's about developing the capacity to hold preferences lightly while adapting to what is. When you cultivate expectation flexibility, you maintain your values and desires while releasing your insistence that reality conform to them. Many resist adjusting their expectations, fearing this means settling for less or enabling poor behavior. However, the opposite proves true. Rigid expectations actually reduce your power by keeping you trapped in cycles of anger and disappointment. Flexible expectations enhance your effectiveness by allowing you to see situations clearly and respond skillfully rather than reactively. Your expectations function as invisible architecture that shapes every experience. Like the foundation of a building, they determine what's possible within the structure of your emotional life. When you consciously design this architecture to align with reality rather than fight against it, you create space for genuine peace and effective action. Consider how this plays out in common situations. A rigid expectation that traffic should flow smoothly generates daily anger on your commute. The flexible expectation that traffic patterns vary allows you to plan accordingly and maintain equilibrium. A demand that your aging parents should change their long-established patterns creates ongoing frustration. The recognition that they are who they are enables you to adjust your approach while preserving your emotional balance. The path forward involves examining your expectations with radical honesty. What are you demanding from yourself, others, and life itself? Which of these demands consistently generate anger through their misalignment with reality? What would it mean to hold these same desires as preferences rather than requirements? This isn't about abandoning hope for positive change or accepting genuinely unacceptable situations. It's about distinguishing between areas where your expectations can influence reality and where they simply create suffering through their misalignment with what is. True power comes from seeing clearly what you can and cannot change, then focusing your energy accordingly. Your relationship with expectations dramatically impacts your susceptibility to anger. When you demand that reality conform to your preferences, you fight an unwinnable battle. When you learn to align your expectations with the actual nature of people and situations, you discover a profound freedom. The ability to engage life effectively without the burden of constant frustration and resentment. This freedom emerges not from resignation but from clarity. Just as a skilled gardener succeeds by working with rather than against the conditions they face, you can cultivate peace by bringing your expectations into harmony with reality. This alignment doesn't mean accepting everything passively. It means choosing your battles wisely and engaging them effectively. These expectations often stem from deeper values and beliefs, some consciously chosen and others inherited from family, culture, or past experiences. Understanding and clarifying these underlying values becomes essential for establishing expectations that enhance rather than diminish your life. By examining the roots of what you expect from yourself, others, and the world around you, you gain the power to distinguish between expectations that serve your growth and those that hold you back. Your inherited beliefs might tell you success looks a certain way, relationships must follow specific rules, or life should unfold according to a predetermined timeline. Yet true freedom comes when you consciously shape expectations that align with your authentic values, rather than automatically accepting the standards passed down to you. Chapter 13. The Value Clarification. When you navigate through life using someone else's map, frustration becomes inevitable. Consider how often your anger ignites not because your authentic values have been violated, but because you're defending positions and priorities inherited from others. This unconscious adoption of external value systems creates a perpetual state of internal conflict, as you find yourself emotionally invested in protecting standards that may not truly resonate with your deepest self. Modern neuroscience reveals how our neural pathways form in response to early environmental cues, creating automatic emotional reactions based on family patterns, cultural messaging, and societal expectations. These conditioned responses become so deeply embedded that they feel like authentic expressions of who we are, when in fact, they represent downloaded programs running without our conscious consent. This invisible inheritance shapes your emotional landscape in profound ways. You might feel intense anger when someone questions your career choice, not because the path deeply fulfills you, but because you're defending your family's definition of success. Or you might experience recurring rage in relationships because you're unconsciously protecting relationship values that were adaptive in your childhood environment but no longer serve your adult needs. The challenge lies in distinguishing between inherited values and authentic personal values. This distinction becomes particularly crucial when examining your anger triggers. Research in psychological development shows that many of our most intense emotional reactions stem from perceived threats to value systems we've never consciously chosen or questioned. Value consciousness represents the capacity to identify, examine, and consciously choose the principles that guide your emotional responses and life decisions. This doesn't mean rejecting all inherited values. Many family and cultural values may align perfectly with your authentic self. Rather, it means developing the discernment to recognize which values genuinely resonate with your core being versus which ones you're carrying out of unconscious conditioning. Your unexamined values operate like background software, constantly running and determining your emotional responses without your awareness. Every time you feel anger rise, this operating system is scanning for threats to values you may have never chosen to prioritize. The energy spent defending these unconscious programs creates unnecessary suffering and prevents you from investing in what truly matters to you. The process of questioning inherited values often triggers fear. Fear of betraying family expectations, cultural identity, or social belonging. However, authentic value alignment doesn't require rejection of your heritage. Instead, it allows you to consciously choose which aspects of your conditioning to preserve, while releasing those that generate unnecessary conflict and anger. Consider how your anger might shift if every emotional reaction stemmed from conscious choice, rather than unconscious conditioning. When someone challenges your life choices, rather than reacting from downloaded defense patterns, you could respond from a place of clear self-knowledge. This clarity doesn't eliminate appropriate anger. It ensures your emotional energy serves your authentic priorities rather than inherited programs. The transformation begins with recognition. Pay attention to moments when anger arises and ask yourself, is this emotion defending my authentic values or my conditioning? Notice how often your strongest reactions protect standards you've never consciously chosen to uphold. This awareness creates space for choice, the ability to consciously select which values deserve your emotional investment. This examination reveals how many anger triggers stem from attempting to uphold incompatible value systems. You might simultaneously try to honor family traditions that emphasize collective harmony while pursuing individual ambitions that create conflict, or defend cultural values about appropriate behavior while exploring personal paths that challenge conventional norms. These conflicting programs generate constant internal friction that often expresses itself as anger. The key lies in developing value consciousness, the ability to identify, question, and consciously choose the principles that guide your life. This doesn't mean adopting a purely individualistic approach or rejecting all inherited wisdom. Rather, it means bringing awareness to your value system so you can intentionally select which principles truly deserve your emotional energy and defensive responses. As you develop this consciousness, you'll likely discover that many of your recurring anger triggers protect values that don't actually align with your deepest truth. This recognition naturally releases you from unnecessary emotional reactions while strengthening your connection to what genuinely matters in your life. Your anger patterns often reflect your underlying value structure. When you operate from unconscious conditioning, these patterns create recurring conflicts and unnecessary suffering. However, when you align your emotional responses with consciously chosen values, anger becomes a precise tool rather than a reactive force, serving your authentic priorities rather than inherited programs. Most significantly, this shift allows you to invest your emotional energy where it truly matters. Instead of dispersing your force defending unconscious conditioning, you can channel it toward protecting and expressing what genuinely resonates with your core being. This focused alignment naturally reduces unnecessary anger while strengthening your capacity for meaningful action aligned with your authentic values. Even with the clearest values, however, our capacity for emotional balance depends significantly on how well we manage our basic physical and mental resources. Chapter 14. The Energy Management. Your capacity for emotional balance isn't just about mental discipline or spiritual awareness. It's intimately connected to how well you manage your basic physical and energetic resources. Picture a cup filled to the absolute brim. In this state, even the smallest disturbance causes overflow. This precisely mirrors how anger operates when your physical resources are depleted. What might normally be a minor annoyance becomes the trigger for intense emotional reactions. Research consistently demonstrates that sleep deprivation alone drastically impairs emotional regulation. The amygdala, your brain's emotional center, becomes hyperactive while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought and impulse control, shows reduced function. Studies at major universities have shown that just one night of poor sleep can increase emotional reactivity by up to 60%. Similarly, nutrition plays a crucial role in emotional stability. Blood sugar fluctuations directly impact mood regulation and stress response. The gut-brain connection reveals how inflammation from poor dietary choices affects neurotransmitter production, potentially creating a physiological environment where anger thrives. Physical movement serves as a natural pressure release valve. Exercise reduces stress hormones while increasing endorphins and BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports emotional resilience. Yet modern life often relegates these fundamental needs to the bottom of priority lists, treating them as luxuries rather than essential foundations for emotional well-being. The contemporary workplace celebrates endless productivity while viewing rest as weakness. Social media promotes constant connectivity while making genuine restoration seem like lost opportunity. These cultural patterns systematically undermine the very resources needed for emotional balance. Preventive emotional maintenance isn't about indulgence. It's a strategic investment in your capacity for equanimity. Think of emotional balance like a muscle that requires proper nutrition, rest, and exercise to function optimally. When this muscle is well maintained, it can handle greater stress without strain. When neglected, even small challenges cause failure. Your anger threshold directly correlates with your physical resource levels. Sleep debt accumulates like financial debt, with compounding negative returns on emotional stability. Chronic dehydration affects cognitive function and mood regulation. Sustained cortisol elevation from lack of recovery time creates a hair trigger for emotional reactions. The foundation of anger prevention lies not in more sophisticated emotional techniques, but in proper management of basic physical needs. Research shows that implementing consistent sleep schedules can reduce emotional reactivity more effectively than many anger management protocols. Regular exercise outperforms numerous psychological interventions for stress regulation. Many resist prioritizing self-care, viewing it as selfish or impractical given life's demands. But consider the cost of not maintaining these foundations: damaged relationships, impaired decision-making, reduced productivity, and compromised health. True responsibility includes managing the resources that enable you to show up fully for life's challenges. Emotional resilience requires sufficient physical bandwidth. Without adequate rest, nutrition, movement, and restoration, even the most advanced psychological tools prove ineffective. It's like trying to run sophisticated software on a computer with failing hardware. The program may be excellent, but the system lacks the resources to execute it properly. The science is clear. Emotional regulation depends heavily on physiological state. Brain imaging studies show that simple interventions like adequate sleep and regular exercise create measurable changes in areas responsible for emotional processing. These basic practices often prove more powerful than complex emotional management strategies. This isn't about achieving perfect health habits. It's about understanding how physical resources fundamentally shape your emotional landscape and making informed choices about their management. Small improvements in sleep quality, nutrition, movement, and restoration can create significant shifts in your capacity to handle triggers without anger. Your relationship with anger transforms when you maintain sufficient physical and energetic resources. What once sparked immediate reactivity becomes manageable. The pause between trigger and response naturally expands. Solutions appear more readily. Resilience increases. The path to emotional freedom must be built on this foundation of basic well-being. Without it, more sophisticated approaches to anger management become exercises in frustration. With it, your capacity for equanimity grows naturally and sustainably. However, even with optimal physical resources, life will present challenges that test your emotional balance. Your boss will criticize your work unfairly. Your partner will say something that touches an old wound. Traffic will push you to the edge when you're already running late. These moments arrive not to torment you, but to show you where growth awaits. The next chapter explores how to develop the sacred pause, that crucial space between trigger and response where freedom from anger becomes possible. This subtle yet profound shift in your relationship with reactivity holds the key to emotional mastery. When you learn to inhabit this space with awareness, what once seemed like inevitable emotional reactions transform into opportunities for conscious choice. Chapter 15. The Sacred Pause. Every moment of anger presents you with two doors. Behind one lies a reaction you'll later regret. Harsh words spoken in haste, actions that damage relationships, or choices that compromise your integrity. Behind the other waits a response aligned with your highest values, one that addresses the situation effectively while preserving your peace of mind and strengthening your relationships. The key to choosing the right door isn't complex anger management techniques or years of meditation practice. It's something far simpler yet profoundly powerful: the sacred pause. Your brain processes emotional triggers with incredible speed. When someone cuts you off in traffic or dismisses your ideas in a meeting, the amygdala activates within milliseconds, flooding your system with stress hormones and preparing you for fight or flight. This lightning-fast response served our ancestors well when facing physical threats, but in modern life, it often generates reactions mismatched to the actual situation. Neuroscience reveals that strong emotions temporarily hijack the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational thinking and impulse control. Without intervention, this neural pattern leads to automatic reactions driven by primitive brain circuits rather than thoughtful responses guided by wisdom. Yet research also shows that even a brief pause can interrupt this pattern, allowing higher brain functions to come back online. This pause isn't about suppressing emotion or denying legitimate concerns. It's about creating space for wisdom to emerge. When you feel anger rising, even a 3-second pause can completely alter the trajectory of your response. This tiny gap between stimulus and reaction contains immense power. It's where your freedom from anger actually lives. Many resist the pause, fearing it signals weakness or loses the momentum needed to address problems. Yet true strength lies not in immediate reaction, but in conscious response. The pause actually enhances your power by ensuring your actions align with your intentions rather than your impulses. Think of music. Without spaces between notes, you'd have only noise. The pauses give meaning to the melody, transforming random sounds into composition. Similarly, the spaces you create between emotional triggers and responses transform reactive patterns into conscious choices. The pause becomes particularly challenging when you feel threatened, disrespected, or treated unfairly. Your system screams for immediate action, interpreting any delay as a dangerous vulnerability. Yet these are precisely the moments when the pause proves most valuable, preventing words and actions that could damage relationships irreparably. Developing this capacity for pause requires understanding the choice point, that critical moment between trigger and response where everything hangs in balance. This point exists in every interaction, though you may not notice it initially. With practice, you'll develop increasing awareness of these moments of possibility. Studies examining emotional regulation consistently show that individuals who can pause before responding demonstrate greater resilience, maintain healthier relationships, and experience more sustained life satisfaction. This isn't because they never feel anger. They simply don't let anger dictate their responses. Your pause doesn't need to be lengthy. Even a single conscious breath can create sufficient space for wisdom to emerge. The key lies not in duration, but in breaking the automatic chain between trigger and reaction. Each time you successfully insert this gap, you strengthen neural pathways supporting thoughtful response over impulsive reaction. Over time, the pause becomes increasingly natural, a brief but crucial space of clarity in emotionally charged moments. You'll find yourself automatically creating this buffer zone when triggers arise, allowing you to respond from your highest self rather than your reactive patterns. Think of the pause as your emotional circuit breaker. Just as a circuit breaker prevents electrical overload by temporarily breaking the connection, your pause prevents emotional overload by briefly interrupting the automatic flow from trigger to reaction. This interruption doesn't eliminate the energy. It simply ensures it expresses itself in ways that serve rather than harm. The practical foundation for developing this capacity lies in the STOP method. Stop, take a breath, observe, proceed wisely. This simple but powerful protocol creates a reliable structure for implementing the pause in challenging moments. When anger begins to rise, you first stop, physically and mentally freezing in place. Then take a breath, consciously drawing air deep into your belly. Next, observe what's happening in your body, mind, and the situation itself. Finally, proceed wisely based on this moment of collected awareness rather than reactive impulse. Chapter 16. The Relapse Wisdom. When you first learned to ride a bicycle, each fall provided essential information your body needed to eventually maintain balance. The scrapes and bruises weren't failures. They were necessary data points guiding you toward mastery. Your journey with anger follows this same natural learning pattern. Every setback contains precisely the wisdom you need for deeper transformation. Most approaches to anger management implicitly promise a linear path to permanent calm. This sets up unrealistic expectations that generate additional suffering when the inevitable waves of anger return. The truth is that emotional mastery, like any profound change, follows a spiral pattern of progress, moving generally upward while revisiting similar territory at deeper levels of understanding. Your brain's neural pathways for anger developed over years or decades of repetition. Expecting these patterns to dissolve without occasional resurgence ignores basic neuroscience. Each angry episode provides valuable information about which triggers still hold power, which situations need additional preparation, and which tools require more development. The key distinction lies in how you respond to these moments. When anger resurfaces, the automatic reaction is often harsh self-judgment. I should be better than this by now, or I'll never change. This self-directed anger compounds the original emotional charge, creating a double layer of suffering. The alternative is approaching setbacks with genuine curiosity, treating them as sophisticated feedback mechanisms rather than evidence of failure. Consider how scientists view unexpected results in their experiments. Rather than becoming discouraged when their hypothesis proves incorrect, they recognize that nature is revealing something important, often more valuable than what they originally sought to prove. Your anger episodes deserve this same investigative respect. The process begins with normalizing setbacks as natural rather than problematic. Just as a toddler doesn't expect to walk perfectly after their first steps, you needn't demand perfection in your emotional journey. Each stumble provides vital calibration data, showing precisely where your practice needs reinforcement. An effective anger autopsy examines episodes with compassionate precision, asking, what preceded this anger? What thoughts or beliefs fueled it? Which tools did I remember to use, and which did I forget in the heat of the moment? What unmet needs or unexamined expectations were revealed? This investigation transforms setbacks from discouraging failures into rich sources of self-knowledge. The perfectionist mind often responds to setbacks in one of two equally unhelpful ways, either abandoning practice entirely, what's the point, or redoubling efforts with grim determination, I'll force myself to do better. Both responses miss the essential wisdom these moments offer. Like a pressure test revealing weak points in a system, setbacks specifically highlight areas needing attention and care. Your capacity for anger transformation grows through integration of lessons learned, not through harsh self-discipline or frustrated resignation. Each episode contains coded messages about your triggers, values, and needs. Approaching these messages with curiosity rather than judgment accelerates your growth exponentially. When you find yourself caught in an angry response despite your best intentions, resist the urge to pile on self-criticism. Instead, treat the episode as valuable laboratory data. What conditions made this particular reaction possible? What early warning signs did you miss? What resources were depleted or unavailable at that moment? These questions transform setbacks from obstacles into stepping stones. The paradox of transformation reveals itself here. Those who demand perfect progress often stagnate, while those who welcome setbacks as teachers tend to advance more quickly. This isn't because they experience fewer difficult moments, but because they extract maximum learning from each one. Your freedom from anger includes freedom from perfectionism about the path itself. Every setback carries a gift, specific information about where and how to grow stronger. By approaching these moments with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, you transform what could be discouraging failures into powerful catalysts for deeper change. The true measure of progress isn't the complete absence of angry feelings, but rather your growing capacity to learn and evolve from each experience. Every setback adds another data point to your emotional wisdom, building a more nuanced and effective approach to life's challenges. Ultimately, what determines your growth isn't how few angry moments you experience, but how skillfully you mine each one for its hidden teachings. As you develop this investigative relationship with setbacks, you'll find they gradually transform from sources of discouragement into reliable guides, pointing the way toward greater emotional freedom. Chapter 17. The Ongoing Practice. Just as a garden requires different care across changing seasons while always needing constant attention, your journey of emotional mastery becomes a lifelong practice rather than a destination. The work of letting go evolves with you, responding to life-shifting demands while maintaining core principles that anchor your transformation. Many imagine anger management as a course to complete or a finish line to cross. This misunderstanding sets up frustration when the need for ongoing engagement becomes clear. The reality is that emotional mastery more closely resembles physical fitness, requiring regular maintenance and adjustment rather than one-time achievement. The foundation of sustainable transformation lies in creating systems that work with your life rather than against it. The most brilliant technique proves worthless if it demands more time, energy, or focus than you realistically have available. Your letting go practice must fit into the existing ecosystem of your responsibilities, relationships, and rhythms. This integration requires understanding that different situations call for different approaches. The pause practice that works perfectly during a work conflict might prove insufficient during family tension. The mindfulness technique that centers you when alone might need modification in social settings. Rather than seeking a universal solution, build a flexible toolkit matched to your specific triggers and contexts. Success comes through developing what we call practice ecology, the artful weaving of new habits into your existing life patterns. This means identifying natural moments for practice rather than trying to force rigid regimens. Perhaps your morning coffee becomes a time for intention setting, your commute an opportunity for breath work, or your evening shower a space for release and reflection. The most common obstacle to consistent practice isn't lack of technique, but lack of integration. When anger management feels like another obligation competing for your limited time and energy, it becomes easy to postpone or abandon. The key lies in finding ways to blend emotional awareness into activities you're already doing. Think of your letting go practice as a living system that requires regular nourishment but adapts to changing conditions. Some seasons might demand more intense focus while others allow lighter maintenance. The goal isn't perfection, but sustainable progress through consistent attention. This flexibility proves especially crucial during high-stress periods when rigid practice requirements often break down. Your system needs built-in adaptability, ways to maintain core benefits even when circumstances limit your usual routines. Perhaps your usual 20-minute meditation becomes 5 minutes of conscious breathing, or your detailed journaling becomes quick noting of triggers. The power lies not in the intensity of practice, but in its consistency and integration. Small actions done regularly reshape your nervous system more effectively than occasional heroic efforts. Your system should feel supportive rather than burdensome, enhancing rather than competing with your life's flow. While creating this personalized system requires initial investment in understanding your patterns and possibilities, it yields compounding returns through reduced reactivity and increased resilience. Your practice ecology becomes self-reinforcing as you experience the benefits of consistent engagement with your inner landscape. This chapter guides you through developing your unique framework for sustainable transformation. You'll learn to identify your most effective practices, match them to specific challenges, and weave them naturally into your daily, weekly, and monthly rhythms. Rather than imposing an artificial structure, you'll cultivate an organic system that grows with you. The foundation lies in honest assessment of your current patterns, challenges, and available resources. Understanding when, where, and how anger typically arises in your life allows strategic placement of supportive practices. Recognizing your actual time and energy constraints enables realistic integration rather than idealistic plans that quickly break down. Your personal ecosystem of emotional resilience grows much like a thriving garden, providing consistent nourishment while remaining flexible enough to adapt as circumstances change. Each practice you cultivate takes root naturally, strengthening your foundation while allowing space for new growth and pruning what no longer serves you. This living framework evolves alongside you, responding to your changing needs and circumstances rather than confining you within rigid boundaries. As you tend to this inner landscape, you'll discover an organic balance between structure and flexibility, discipline and spontaneity, creating a sustainable system uniquely tailored to your journey of transformation. Chapter 18: The Liberated Life. Imagine wearing dark glasses for years, seeing the world only in muted shades, until one day you remove them and discover a spectrum of colors you never knew existed. This is what happens when you break free from anger's dominance over your life. The transformation isn't just about experiencing less rage. It's about accessing entirely new dimensions of experience that were always present, but hidden behind anger's distorting lens. When anger no longer consumes your mental and emotional bandwidth, an extraordinary amount of energy becomes available for creation rather than reaction. The hours previously spent ruminating about grievances transform into time for meaningful pursuits. The physical energy once burned by chronic tension flows into vitality and presence. The mental space formerly occupied by revenge fantasies opens for innovative thinking and genuine problem solving. This liberation manifests across every aspect of your existence. In relationships, you move from defensive positioning to genuine connection. Without anger's constant interference, you hear what others are actually saying rather than what you fear or assume they mean. Your presence becomes a source of stability rather than unpredictability, creating space for deeper intimacy and trust. At work, you shift from battling circumstances to navigating them strategically. Challenges that once triggered defensive reactions become opportunities for creative solutions. Your capacity for clear thinking under pressure expands dramatically when anger no longer hijacks your cognitive resources. Leadership abilities emerge naturally as you model responsive rather than reactive engagement with difficulties. Your health transforms as the physiological burden of chronic anger lifts. The immune system strengthens when no longer suppressed by anger's inflammatory effects. Sleep deepens without anger's adrenaline disrupting natural cycles. Even your posture changes as habitual tension patterns release, creating an embodied confidence that others instinctively trust. This shift happens progressively rather than overnight. You'll notice brief moments of choosing differently in situations that once triggered automatic anger. These moments gradually extend into longer periods of emotional freedom. Eventually, you discover that calm presence has become your default state, with anger arising only when genuinely needed as an appropriate response rather than an automatic reaction. Many fear that releasing anger means becoming passive or losing the drive to address injustice. The opposite proves true. Without anger consuming your resources, you become more effective at creating meaningful change. Your actions stem from clear perception rather than emotional reactivity. Your voice carries more weight because it comes from wisdom rather than rage. The profound paradox you discover is that anger never actually protected or served you. It was the prison itself. You were both the jailer and the jailed, maintaining your own constraints through the belief that anger was necessary for survival, strength, or justice. As this realization deepens, an entirely new relationship with life becomes possible. Your fundamental sense of identity transforms. No longer defined by reactions to what you don't want, you connect with deeper values and authentic aspirations. The energy previously invested in fighting against flows into creating for. Your presence becomes a gift rather than a threat, contributing naturally to the well-being of others without sacrificing your own. This expansion radiates beyond personal transformation. As your interactions shift from confrontation to connection, you become a catalyst for positive change in your relationships and communities. Your example demonstrates the possibility of responding to life's challenges with wisdom rather than warfare. Your freedom from anger creates space for others to discover their own path to emotional liberation. The most remarkable discovery is that this liberated way of being isn't something you need to create or achieve. It's your natural state, already present beneath layers of conditioned anger responses. The journey isn't about becoming someone new, but rather unveiling who you've always been when not confined by anger's limitations. What emerges is not a perfect absence of anger, but a freedom from anger's rule. You develop the capacity to experience the full range of human emotions while remaining anchored in deeper wisdom. Anger may still arise, but it no longer defines or drives you. You learn to channel its energy in service of your highest values, rather than letting it control your actions. This transformation at your core opens up possibilities you may have never imagined. The path ahead holds possibilities beyond what your current mindset allows you to envision. As your relationship with anger transforms, dormant capacities spring to life. Creativity flows more freely. Relationships deepen with newfound trust, and challenges that once triggered reactivity become opportunities for growth. You access an inner wellspring of wisdom that was always present but obscured by anger's constant interference. This evolution reveals itself in countless ways throughout your daily life. Where harsh words might have sparked immediate defensiveness, you now respond with steady clarity. When others project their own anger onto you, you maintain your center rather than absorbing their emotional state. You begin to experience genuine compassion for those still trapped in anger's grip, remembering your own journey while standing firm in your truth. The future opens up with expanded horizons as you shed the heavy armor of defensive anger. You discover that true strength lies not in building walls, but in remaining open yet unshakable. This isn't just about managing anger better. It's about stepping into a fuller expression of who you truly are, when no longer defined by this limiting emotion. Conclusion. Who you become when you're no longer ruled by anger. Continued. At work, you shift from battling circumstances to navigating them strategically. Challenges that once triggered defensive reactions become opportunities for innovative solutions. Your energy flows into creation rather than conflict, allowing you to access deeper levels of professional capability and leadership. Colleagues notice the change, Not because you become passive, but because you become more powerfully present. Your physical health transforms as the chronic stress of anger releases its grip on your body. The persistent muscle tension, digestive issues, and sleep disruptions that accompanied chronic anger begin to resolve. Many report feeling younger, more energetic, and more resilient as their bodies no longer carry the heavy burden of sustained fight-or-flight activation. Most profoundly, your sense of self undergoes a fundamental shift. You discover that strength doesn't require aggression, that boundaries don't demand hostility, and that justice can be pursued more effectively from a place of clarity than chaos. The energy previously consumed by anger becomes available for growth, creativity, and genuine connection with others. You develop what might be called emotional sovereignty, the capacity to experience strong feelings without being controlled by them. This isn't about becoming emotionally flat or unreactive. Instead, you gain access to a fuller spectrum of emotional experience because you're no longer constantly operating from anger's narrow bandwidth. Your relationship with injustice and problems evolves from reactive to responsive. You maintain the capacity to recognize what needs to change while approaching challenges with strategic clarity rather than emotional reactivity. This makes you more, rather than less effective at creating meaningful change in your life and the world. Time itself seems to expand as you're no longer losing hours to anger's aftermath. The mental space previously occupied by grievances becomes available for pursuits that actually enrich your life. You find yourself more present in each moment, able to appreciate life's beauty, even while acknowledging its imperfections. This transformation ripples out far beyond your personal experience. As your presence becomes more stable and genuine, you naturally inspire others toward greater emotional freedom. Your relationships deepen as people feel safer being authentic around you. Your capacity to listen without reactivity creates space for genuine dialogue, even around challenging topics. This is not about becoming a different person. It's about revealing who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioned anger responses. The peace, clarity, and strength you discover were never created by this transformation. They were simply uncovered as anger's grip loosened. What emerges is not a saint or a pushover, but rather someone who engages with life's full complexity from a place of grounded wisdom. You maintain the capacity for appropriate assertiveness while releasing the need for aggressive defensiveness. You can acknowledge injustice while responding from clarity rather than rage. This is who you become when anger no longer rules your life, not someone who never feels angry, but someone who has mastered the art of holding anger instead of being held by it. You develop the profound ability to witness anger's presence without being consumed by its flames. Like a skilled martial artist who redirects an opponent's force rather than meeting it head-on, you learn to channel anger's energy into purposeful action rather than destructive reaction. The emotion flows through you without controlling you, allowing wisdom rather than impulse to guide your response.